I'm holding this glass of water, and you're probably thinking that I'm going to be talking about glasses half full, half empty today. I may. But really, what I want you to be thinking about here is how much effort it takes to hold this up. It's not a heavy glass, not a lot of water there. But how long could I hold this up? Could I hold this up for the 14, 15 minutes that I talked today? And it's not just about glasses. This is about what you do to yourself, that in the course of your life, you do a number of things that take a lot of energy and that are hurtful, particularly the way that you think about yourself and the way that you worry repeatedly about things. And so what I'm going to encourage you to do is put that glass down. Put it down. We talked in the last video about biological vulnerabilities. Today we're going to talk more about psychological vulnerabilities, and particularly the sense of hopelessness. So we'll be focusing here. The problem is that our thinking is often problematic. We interpret situations negatively. We distort reality to fit our expectations. We ruminate. We hold that glass up. Ruminating, thinking about things over and over and over again. We don't think critically about things. We jump to conclusions. We think rigidly and repetitively, and we perceive things in manners that frustrate continued effort or coping. Rather than being helpful, our thinking often tends to be the problem. I'm not saying don't think. I'm saying think well. So what you should see in this chart is that your thoughts affect your feelings as well as your physical symptoms. So when you're saying to yourself, I'm a failure, you feel sad, which causes you to avoid that situation, which causes you to feel tired. And your thoughts also cause that tiredness, which may conversely also reinforce that cycle of thinking. You can't change many parts of this cycle, but you can change your thoughts. And as you change your thoughts, everything else begins to change. So we talked about this earlier in the semester. What you're going to be doing is paying particular attention to here. So it's not that Marcus being late causes you to be upset and self-doubting, but what you think when you say, what's wrong? Is he coming? Maybe Marcus is upset with me. The style of thinking that you engage in is what causes you to feel in a particular way. No event necessarily has a negative consequence. It's how you think about it. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was in college, my boyfriend gave me diamond earrings. The diamond earrings is the activating event. How do you think I felt? How I felt was angry. I felt really pretty angry with him because I had told him that I don't like diamonds. That's not what I need. That's not what I want. And he didn't listen to me. Diamonds don't necessarily make someone happy. What we need to be doing is thinking about that belief. What is going on there? Now that's something you'll find all sorts of different charts that can be used. You can do something as simple as the last chart. And that's actually what I typically do with my clients. I'll ask them to track how they're feeling, and what's happening at that time, and then pay attention to what they're thinking. So that's a very simple kind of chart. You can also do something much more complicated like this one, that asks you to pay attention to automatic thoughts and rate emotions and what's happening in the situation and name those cognitive distortions. And we'll talk about some of the specific ones later in this slide with Eeyore. To review the evidence, are there other ways of thinking about this? And what are your emotions afterwards? Aaron Beck talks about the cognitive triad. He says there are 3 different kinds of things that people who are depressing themselves do. Notice it's not that we are depressed, but we actively depress ourselves by the way that we think. 3 things. We think negative things about ourselves, about what's happening now, and also about what's going to happen in the future. Those things can be changed. So optimists and pessimists tend to think differently. And you might stop for a minute and think about whether I'm an optimist or a pessimist. And then think about how you know that. And probably the way that you know that is based on the style of thinking that I engage in and that you've heard over the last 6 or 7 weeks now. Optimists tend to make internal attributions for good events. I did this good thing. I'm smart. And they make bad or external attributions for bad events. My teacher was unfair. Pessimists, on the other hand, do the exact opposite. They make external attributions for good events and internal attributions for bad ones. So when they earn an A on an exam, it's the teacher rather than themselves. And when they fail, it's them. Optimists make global explanations for good events and specific ones for bad. Or I do well on multiple choice exams, but I'm not very smart. Optimists do the reverse. I'm smart, but I run into problems on multiple choice exams. Optimists expect good things to continue and expect bad things are temporary. Pessimists, on the other hand, expect good things are the exception and bad things will continue. So what a cognitive therapist is going to do is ask you to begin to monitor your thoughts, and I ask you to do that. Monitor your thoughts. Recognize how and when they're maladaptive and what the relationship is between those thoughts and emotions. And my guess is as you begin to actively listen to your thoughts, you're going to discover that you sometimes think some maladaptive things. We all do sometimes, but it's sometimes or more. So back to our continuum that you see with, Carney and Troll. I want you to begin to substitute more accurate judgments for the inaccurate ones. So when you run into problems, rather than saying it's always like this, challenge that. Is it really always like this, or is it sometimes like this? And then gather feedback to determine whether this makes sense. So going back to the Marcus example, you may have been jumping to conclusions about why Marcus was late. What is the evidence? What is the evidence? I'm going to just quickly talk about these thinking errors. You'll find more in your book. You'll find more in a handout that's posted on, in your folder. One of these is all or nothing thinking. It's either, everybody likes us or nobody likes us. Everything works, nothing works. You have one thing go wrong in a day and think that that's the way it is all the time. So that's black and white thinking. Overgeneralization is when we are assuming that this is a general phenomenon rather than more particular. Mental filter is when we are are filtering out some kinds of information. So you may have noticed that on bad days you only pay attention to the bad things, even though good things also happen. We often disqualify the positive. So rather than paying attention to what's going well, we excuse it. The reason I got an A on this exam is because it was easy. With the Marcus example, it sounds like there was some jumping to conclusions. That Marcus was, here's the advantage of having water here, that Marcus was late, and the person in the example concluded that it was about her. We engage in magnification and minimization. So rather than something being, small, we see it big. Your mom may have said you're making a mountain out of a molehill. We also do the reverse. When something's good, we minimize it, and that keeps us, depressed. You may have earned an A on the exam and say, it's not important. Emotional reasoning, you may feel bad and therefore conclude that you're bad, or feel guilty and conclude that you're guilty. Shoulding is when you're saying, I should do this, and it's almost like someone taking a whip and beating on you. We may labelize or label or mislabel things, causing us some problems, or personalize things that really aren't about us, such as with Marcus, assuming that Marcus's behavior was about us. So there are two things we want to happen when we're treating depression. The first one is that we want to stop the depression. And for that, antidepressants may be somewhat faster. They generally seem to work in, 3 weeks, maybe even a little bit less. The problem is that somatic therapies are palliative. They stop the symptoms, they don't stop the problem. What we also want to do is prevent the recurrence of depression. And cognitive therapy, as we've been talking in this video, prevents relapses. And so what we think is that cognitive therapy, and in fact also interpersonal therapies, are curative, that they prevent the problem, that they stop the depression. So if we look at how, or assessments of depression, we see that if 8 weeks out, that both cognitive therapy and the antidepressant medication are doing better than the placebo. The placebo is the green bar. It looks like the antidepressant medication is doing a little bit better at 8 weeks, but by the time we're 16 weeks out, they're pretty much comparable. This is the one that I think is pretty cool. Remember, earlier this week we were talking about the relapse rates for crisis management and family-focused therapy. And we said that family-focused therapy did better than crisis management. We had fewer relapses. And you see the same thing here, that people relapse. But 2 years out following active treatment, there are considerably fewer relapses for the antidepressant or for the cognitive therapy group, which is in blue, than for certainly the placebo group, which is the green, but also more than the antidepressant medication, either the ones who are compliant or not. We want to prevent relapse. We want people to not have or get depressed again. And so anything we can do, is advantageous. So what should you do now? What I would do is begin observing your thinking. What patterns do you see? Is your thinking generally helpful or not? And if not, gently, nudge yourself in a more positive direction. And take care.